Welcome back to the show. You're hanging with your girl Sarah right here on Relax Radio. Now you're tuned into the sunrise, and welcome to the final lot of my show. Like I said, we have a lot of interesting things to be talking about. We have a lot of things we'll be talking about right now as well. So make sure you stay tuned because I have a lot of interesting content coming your way, especially a lot of things related to health. Now, health is something that we need to focus on during this pandemic and during this time as well, because our health is of the it is a priority. It is something we need to focus on as well, and especially given the fact that this pandemic has actually made us made us a little less immune, has also resulted in some of the existing conditions that we have becoming much worse. It's very, very important that we focus on our health. It's very important that we focus on some of these new and largely unrecognized diseases conditions as well. So that is what I'll be talking about today. Now I'll be talking about chronic pain because it affects 1 in 3 young adults in England. And the thing is, even though it affects 1 in 3 young adults, it's still not recognized as a very serious health condition here in the United Kingdom. So that's why we will be talking about it. So obviously, I also have to remind you that while we're having that conversation, it's also, amazing if you could go follow us on our socials, which is Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, because that way you can actually make sure you're updated on everything that we're talking about, be it science, be it sports, be it technology, whatever it is. You can always stay updated, and also make sure you download our app, which is available on both the Google Play Store and the Apple App Store, and that way you can be a part of this conversation anytime you want. Because here at Relax Radio, we love to hear your thoughts. We love to hear everything that you want us to talk about, but also we love to hear your opinion as well, because obviously it's going to help all of us. It's definitely going to help everyone who's listening in as well to hear your opinion, because this is about perspective. This is about everyone else's opinion and what everyone else thinks of everything that is happening in the world. So obviously make sure you text me on 07852473473, and make sure you are part of this conversation. Make sure you are involved in everything that's happening in the United Kingdom, but also involved in having information, involved in making all these informed decisions that you have to make with all the information we provide right here on Relax Radio. So let's get into this whole issue of chronic pain. We'll talk about chronic pain. We'll talk about why it's so important. We'll talk about what it actually is and why we need to start focusing on chronic pain right now, and why the situation has exacerbated than it exacerbated from what it used to be back then. So chronic pain is actually defined as pain that lasts more than 12 weeks despite treatment or medication. Now, obviously, sometimes, this is why we take painkillers, right? When we're in a lot of pain, when our pain is unbearable, we take a lot of painkillers to make sure that it goes away. And most of the time it works, right? Your pain doesn't last for longer than a few days. Sometimes it definitely doesn't last for weeks, right? Unless it's you sprained your ankle, or you fractured your arm, whatever it is. Unless it's a situation like that, pain usually comes and goes, right? That's, at least that's what the saying says, pain is temporary. But in this case, not so, because chronic pain lasts more than 12 weeks, and that's about 3 months. That's more than 3 months, actually. If it's more than 12 weeks, it's definitely longer than 3 months. And despite you taking treatment, despite you taking any form of medication, what happens is you still have this pain. So this is referred to as chronic pain, and most sufferers of chronic pain actually have arthritis or musculoskeletal conditions, such as ankylosing spondylitis. Yeah, I kind of like pronouncing that sickness because it's nice to pronounce. There's a lot of nice words in the ankylosing spondylitis, but that is what the condition is. However, there are growing numbers of young adults who are suffering from chronic pain that seriously affects their lives. And with the rise blamed on obesity, sedentary lifestyles, and stresses faced by that age group, right? Obviously, if we compare the young adults of now and the young adults of, say, the some 20, 30 years back. Obviously circumstances have changed a lot because the world right now is so much more competitive, it's so much more capitalistic than it used to be. And obviously this means that a lot of these young adults right now have so much more pressure, not just pressure in terms of work, but also societal pressures to have these certain expectations, to achieve these certain expectations by a certain age. And we've seen this all over social media as well, right? Because you all have, say, you see all these posts, you see these memes that say, oh, by the age of 28 you should have your own house or your own vehicle, and by the age of 35 you should be able to retire, which is actually quite ridiculous if you think about it. But there are so many different types of expectations that are there for young adults nowadays that weren't there for the young adults back then. Obviously situations have changed, things have changed so much more, and there's so much more pressure for all the people right now. So then that actually results in all these young adults, it results in all these people out there actually having different types of pain. Because look, if you're living in this competitive world and you have all these expectations that you need to live up to, and forget about expectations from your family, sometimes your own workplace's expectations, you have to meet deadlines, you have to be really productive, you have to work long hours, you have to work overtime, sometimes you have to come work on the weekends. So when there are instances like that, obviously then you're going to be under a lot of pressure, you're going to be under a lot of stress, and you're always going to be at work, right? And obviously that is very, very unhealthy, because that way you can't really focus on yourself, you can't focus on any of the personal relationships that you have with your friends or your family, and you're constantly sitting in front of this computer in in the same position for a really long time. So obviously the fact that chronic pain exists in so many young adults nowadays is really not surprising, right? So and that's not the only reason as to why chronic pain exists as well. So things like obesity, things like sedentary lifestyles, and even stresses that are faced by this age group have resulted in chronic pain that affects them. So a new report on the prevalence of chronic pain in England has found that the number of people beset with it remained steady between 2011 to 2017 at about 15.5 million. So obviously during that 6-year period, it was steady. There weren't any fluctuations, it didn't reduce or it didn't increase, but it was quite steady. But um but the proportion of people aged 16 to 34 affected by what experts call high impact chronic pain, so acute, which is so bad that it actually leaves them struggling to work, interact socially, and look after themselves independently, actually rose dramatically from that time period from 21% to 34%. And that's definitely a huge increase, right? Because if it was 21% but it's 34% now, and this age group from 16 to 34 is actually struggling to even interact, um just goes to show that chronic pain is something that is actually very, very prevalent here, and something that is quite often missed out on as well, right? Because when I was researching on this, obviously I found a lot of research that said a lot of these a lot of doctors around UK didn't actually recognize chronic pain as as a condition that was very, very very, very painful. They thought, a lot of them thought that chronic pain was just something you think, like it's all in your head. And look, we've all been in that place where doctors have said, you don't really have, there isn't really anything wrong with you, it's just all in your head. But the thing is, even though doctors are saying that about chronic pain, there has been new research and there has been a lot of new change that goes to show that chronic pain isn't actually something that is in our head. This actually happens, and it's crazy how much it has risen. How people with chronic pain has risen from 21% to 34% um recently. And this is just a 16 to 34 age gap. That is quite young. So obviously that just goes to show that this is very, very scary. This is something that people need to start paying more attention to, especially the health sector. And there is also this growing realization that pain can be a disease in and of itself, and the pandemic could be making it worse, because chronic pain has actually been made worse by long COVID. So like I said, there are all these doubts, there's all these uncertainties about whether chronic pain is actually, so whether it actually exists, because like I said, a lot of doctors think that if you are in so much of pain, you tend to make it up in your head. But the truth is, research has found that that is not so. You don't really make it up in your head, and that it is in fact quite dangerous. So then you begin to understand that when it comes to chronic pain, especially if there has been a huge increase, especially in this age group that you consider as young adults, then that means we really need to focus on incentives. We need to focus on measures that will help alleviate this chronic pain for themselves. And I'll obviously be talking about a few stories of people with chronic pain and how they've struggled to find the correct painkillers for their chronic pain in a few more minutes. But until I get into that, it also means that we need to find faster processes, faster ways in which we can actually find more medicine, in ways in which we can diagnose the fact that someone has chronic pain and actually treat this condition, right? And there's obviously also this whole realization that pain in itself could be a disease, right? Like chronic pain, especially given the fact that this pandemic has made it worse. We spoke about long COVID some time back, where you have symptoms of COVID for a minimum of 12 weeks, even though you're supposed to be completely recovered. Even though that's the case, obviously some of these people still have symptoms of COVID, which is then referred to as long COVID. Now, apparently, over 2 million people in the United Kingdom have long COVID, but that just goes to show conditions like chronic pain conditions, where people are constantly in pain, are in fact exacerbated by COVID-19. And that in itself is another problem that the health sector needs to deal with as well. And I know it's actually quite scary, because there's so many things that the National Health Service is dealing with right now. They're dealing with the pandemic, they're dealing with obesity, they're dealing with the aging population, and there's so many things they're dealing with. So it just goes to show how very important it is that we try to tackle all of this right now, because if we don't, these conditions, these diseases are in fact going to lead to even more, other diseases. So it's very, very important that we try to address this as soon as possible. Now, make sure you stay tuned, because I'm going to head into a little break, but don't worry, because I'll be back soon afterwards to keep talking to you about chronic pain.
And it gives them something to look at, and it makes them laugh. It makes them laugh, so that's why I do it.
Oh, and it could be a really good pickup line as well. Ladies who ask, "Hey, excuse me, so why are you wearing something so colorful?" I mean, hey, you can always have something up on your sleeve. I mean, got me thinking. You want to stand out. Why do you want to stand out though so much, especially with these kind of shirts when you're writing? There must be a purpose behind it, right?
Well, when you say a purpose, Nick, what I do, I wear the shirts, mainly one, because they're nice and bright. So they make me visible, especially if I'm riding on the road.
Okay. That's very important, right? Because you want cars,
Very important. And also, like, people see me in, like, calves, and perhaps I shouldn't be saying this on air, I suppose, but in the bar afterwards.
All right.
And it gives them something to look at, and it makes them laugh. It makes them laugh, so that's why I do it.
Oh, and it could be a really good pickup line as well. Ladies who ask, "Hey, excuse me, so why are you wearing something so colorful?" I mean, hey, you can always have something up on your sleeve. I mean, you look like a guy who would do.
You know me too well. You know me too well, Nick.
One of the easiest ways to increase your net worth is to ensure that you have higher cash flows. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to not buy things on hire purchase, not buy things over months and months because you can't afford them now, but you want it. It's kind of that delayed gratification. Rather than buy that couch, that car, that stereo, that computer, whatever item, and pay it off over 12, 24, 36 months at an interest rate, rather invest that money, make do with what you've got, and then after 12, 24, 36 months, take the money that you've now invested and buy that good. An asset could be anything that appreciates or reduces a tax bill. So it could still be a liability, but it reduces their tax bill. And I'm not going to go into the technicalities because that's out of our remit here. However, for our use or our purpose, what we are talking for the listeners here is I would put this definition of an asset forward. An asset is anything that increases your income. Anything.
Now, there's a lot of conversation around who pays more taxes, if it is the rich or if it is the poor, right? When you are basically going out and during a day, if you go to a restaurant, you have to pay taxes there. If you buy a car, you have to pay taxes there. So why is it even a conversation that, the rich pay less taxes or the poor pay more taxes? Why is it a conversation like that?
Because it's true, the rich generally pay less tax. A rich person walks into a Tesco's or a Sainsbury's, they're not going to get a different bill than another person, right? They're still going to pay the same VAT on those goods. They're still going to pay the same thing. So that's all the same. However, the differences come in if you can pay yourself from your own company, you can structure it in a way that you pay less income tax through paying a bit of salary, paying dividends, and so forth, and then also deferring income. Also, your pension payments or contributions can be different. So that increases your tax sort of gap, if you want to use it that way. Where a PAYE person just gets paid salary and bonus. And now those are the most highly taxed sources of income in the UK, definitely, in the UK.
Welcome back to the show. It is your girl Sarah right here on Relaks Radio. Now you tuned into the Sunrise with me, Sarah, and it is in fact the final lot of my show. But don't worry, because I still have a lot more of interesting content to keep you occupied with until it's time for me to head out of here. Okay, so don't worry, because I have a lot of fun and interesting content heading your way. So make sure you stay tuned. But also, just a quick reminder that we were just talking about chronic pain. We were talking about what exactly it is and what steps need to be taken when it comes to addressing this issue. But also, quick reminder that while you're at it, you can actually go follow us on our socials, which is Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, so you can keep yourself updated on the very latest of what we're talking about as well. And also, you can download our app, which is available on both the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store, for you to download, which means that you can be a part of this conversation anytime that you want. Okay, so it's definitely going to help you. So make sure you stay tuned for any conversation that happens right here on Relaks Radio. Now, also, like I said some time back, right here on Relaks Radio, we value your opinion. We focus on your opinion and your perspective on different things around the world. So make sure you tell us your opinion. Make sure you share your thoughts and your opinions with us. You share your opinions and thoughts with us by texting us on 078-52-473-473, because I would absolutely love to hear your opinions and thoughts about everything that we're talking about. So let's get into this conversation about chronic pain. Now, like I said earlier, it has in fact been exacerbated by long COVID. Long COVID has intensified chronic pain for a lot of the people who had chronic pain way before the pandemic. But also, even if they didn't have it before the pandemic, if they contracted the virus, then it resulted in them having long COVID. It resulted in them having chronic pain after they were supposed to be recovered. Right now, for most people, pain is actually an unpleasant but short-lived sensation that normally occurs as a result of illness or injury. So it's the thing that we need to keep in mind is, for most people, pain is something very short. It's only for a few, sometimes it's for a few minutes, sometimes a few hours, sometimes a few days, but it's never for as long as weeks and weeks and months, and sometimes even years of pain, right? So that's why it's very, very important that we discuss this, because pain itself is a very uncomfortable feeling. But let's get into this conversation now. Some people may experience ongoing or chronic pain. The assumption is that there must be some kind of underlying physical injury, such as crushed nerve, or an angry inflamed joint, because that's what you think, right? You think, for people to be in pain, then there must be some other issue. It's definitely not that pain in itself can be a disease, but the fact that pain is caused because of something else. And that's what we have seen, in the past as well. If someone is going through, if someone is in a lot of pain, then you naturally, very naturally, assume that they either have a sprained ankle or a fractured hand. We always tend to think that pain is a symptom of another underlying disease that you have. But the thing is, increasingly, that is not the case. And experts are, in fact, waking up to this idea that chronic pain in itself can occur without any obvious physical injury, that chronic pain can even appear in any completely separate area of the body from the original site of tissue damage, right? What that means is that, say your hand is fractured, but your foot could be paining. So obviously, then there is obviously a lot of questions that we have, like, okay, if your hand is broken, then why is your foot hurting? And this is a sort of realization that experts are waking up to, because they're beginning to realize that chronic pain in itself is a disease, and it's not necessarily a symptom that you might be having an underlying disease, or that you might be having some other disease that no one really knows about, or a disease that someone needs to find. Someone, what I mean when I say someone is obviously a doctor, right? And also, there is mounting evidence that seemingly mounting evidence that showed very different pain conditions. For example, chronic headaches, low back pain, and jaw pain, say, they may share actually common underlying mechanisms, and that once a person develops one chronic pain condition, they're predisposed to develop others. And it's just, the more you read about it, the more scary it gets, because if you have at least one of those pains, then chances are you probably get the others as well, right? And that is why it's very, very important to actually talk about chronic pain. It's very important for you to discuss chronic pain and talk about ways in which you can address it and try to make it better, because there are so many people out there who aren't even aware of the fact that they might be going through chronic pain. Okay, because this is some new research, because this is something that is newly found. People tend to think that chronic pain in itself is just it's just not its own disease, that chronic pain is, or pain in fact is just a symptom, or is just your body's way of saying maybe you're going through an injury, right? But because people are unaware of the fact that pain in itself could be a disease right now, they tend to think that if you're in pain, then that means that you have an underlying condition. So that's why it's very, very important for us to have this conversation, so other people are aware of the fact that pain in itself can be a disease, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you might be having any other underlying issues that might cause that pain. So the COVID-19 pandemic, we need to talk about that, because the pandemic has actually made this situation much, much worse, right? um what I mean when I say that is, sometime back we were talking about long COVID. We were talking about how people tend to have some symptoms of COVID, even though they're supposed to be fully recovered, right? Now, one of the most common symptoms that are reported by people with long COVID is musculoskeletal pain, and that is basically the uh, pain around the muscles that are closer to your skeleton, right? So those with existing musculoskeletal pain conditions seem to be at a risk of experiencing stronger pain after a serious COVID infection. So just imagine that you're in pain, but now after COVID you just have to deal with that pain, but it's 10 times worse than it used to be. The thing is, when you're in pain you can't really function, right? That's why this is a huge issue, because when there are so many young people who are constantly in so much of pain, then that means that they can't function. And we need to understand that right now there is a lot of contribution to our economies, to our companies, whatever it is, by a lot of young adults out there, right? The age of 16 to 34 is, the time when children are, or young people are learning, that they're going to college, they're getting jobs, they're settling in. So obviously they have a huge role in the economy, they play a huge role in the economy as well. So we need to understand, and we need to start addressing the fact that chronic pain is something very, very important. Now I'll get now, like I said, I told you I will actually get into a few stories about people who are dealing with chronic pain, and we'll get into that. But right now we need to talk about musculoskeletal pain, right, which is an issue that we must start considering as a long covid problem. And this was actually said by Professor Lars Arendt Nielsen. He said that we need to start considering the fact that musculoskeletal pain in itself might actually be a long COVID problem. Now, since 2011, there appears to have been an alarming increase in high impact chronic pain among young adults. And this means that this could change the life chances of a generation, like forever, right? And this was actually said by Professor John Newton, who's Public Health England's Director of Health Improvement, who helped produce this report on chronic pain. So between 2011 and 2017, there were rises in high impact chronic pain of 2% among 35 to 44-year-olds and 45 to 54-year-olds, and of 5% among those aged 55 to 64. But 16 to 34-year-olds were the only age group to experience such a pronounced increase in prevalence of this disabling condition. Now, this is what I said earlier, right? The increase in high impact chronic pain of the age group of 16 to 34 went from 21% to 34%. Okay, that is a huge increase, right? In comparison to all these other high impact chronic pain increases, which was just increased by 2% among the 35 to 44-year-olds, and 45 to 54-year-olds as well, and 5% among those aged from 55 to 64. Now obviously when you're old, chances are you have a higher chance of getting pain, right? Obviously, because you're growing old, your joints aren't going to work the same way they used to. But the fact of the matter is, it's not all people that are that are majority of this problem. It's actually very young people my age, your age, people that are really young that are experiencing this kind of pain. Now that's why it's very important that we try to address this and try to deal with it, because a lot of the doctors out there are now only that they're now only beginning to realize the fact that chronic pain in itself is something that is affecting a lot of people. Because a lot of the things that people have heard, people who go through chronic pain have heard, is the fact that, oh, it's all in your head, it's not really a disease, you're just imagining the fact that you're in pain. And they don't sometimes even give painkillers for the fact. And we also need to understand that when it comes to chronic pain, some of the painkillers that we use aren't always going to, that they aren't always going to help. Now, one person who actually experienced chronic pain had to consistently change her combination of painkillers that she used. And also it took her a few years to actually figure out which combination of painkillers that she needed to use. So it took her about 5 to 6 years of being in intensive pain to figure out, for her doctors as well, to figure out ways, or rather the pills that she needed to make sure that she wasn't in pain anymore. So that just goes to show that our health system is in fact, quite ill-equipped in dealing with chronic pain, simply because they're just finding out about chronic pain. They're just beginning to realize that pain in itself can be another, disease, and that pain in itself needs to be dealt in a different way. And when talking about, our health system, we also need to talk about ways in which you can diagnose chronic pain, right? How are you going to differentiate the fact that the pain you have is not something from an underlying condition, but that it is, completely separate, that this pain is because you have chronic pain? So there's a lot of questions like that that need to be answered, and that also means that we need to our health services need to, in research more about this condition, because like I said, this is something that is completely new. This is something they're just finding out. So there is in fact a lot of research that they need to that they need to do. Now make sure you stay tuned, because I'll be back in a few more minutes to actually talk to you about chronic pain, everything related to chronic pain, and about our health systems dealing with chronic pain as well. But until then, we're going to head into this little break
again. But now, if you say to a child, if I went up to a child and said, you've had one to forget, God, there'd be an inquest. Me, why did you reject my son? Oh, I haven't rejected your son.
I want to talk about, how the generation gap, how much it's changed, especially when you check the youth nowadays in comparison, to people back in the day.
I'd say when I was younger, it was more disciplined. Not now.
In comparison to now.
Not at all. Not now. The way things are nowadays, the younger generation, you seem that they can't accept the word no, if that makes sense. They can't
accept rejection, essentially, is all you're trying to say.
Yeah, they can't accept the word no. So if you, how did I do? Or you didn't do very well, and they get upset. And when I was a youngster, my father used to say to me, because I used to be sport mad when I was very young. Well, I still am sport mad, but like participating in different sports. And if I had a bad game, for example, he'd say to me, you had one to forget.
That's it. Your dad sounds like a smart guy. I mean, yeah, that's the real fact of the matter, yeah.
He'd say to me, you had one to forget. Get over it. And that was it. So I dust myself down and do it again. But now, if you say to a child, if I went up to a child and said, you've had one to forget, God, there'd be an inquest. An inquest. Me, why did you reject my son? Oh, I haven't rejected your son. Or daughter. I've just told them that they need to buck their ideas up.
That's the truth right there. I mean, if you think about it, if you check the generations, like right now in the US as well, I've seen a lot of these things as well. In the UK, you get medals for participation. But what's the point? What are you trying to? Yeah, what's the point? Either you win or you lose. People are so afraid to put that whole notion of losing. When it comes to right now, the generation gap is just crazy. How much a lot has changed. Social media has taken control of our lives, and we don't even realize it anymore. We're crippled because of it.
That's absolutely right, Nick. Because as you said, nowadays it seems that you get rewarded for failure. For the life of me, Nick, I can't get my head around that. Perhaps I'm just getting old and morbid, I don't know. I just can't get my head around how you could be rewarded for failure.
There's a lot of conversation around who pays more taxes, if it is the rich or if it is the poor, right? When you are basically going out and during a day, you go to a restaurant, you have to pay taxes there. If you buy a car, you have to pay taxes there. So why is it even a conversation that, the rich pay less taxes or the poor pay more taxes? Why is it a conversation like that?
Because it's true, the rich generally pay less tax. A rich person walks into a Tesco's or a Sainsbury's, they're not going to get a different bill than another person, right? They're still going to pay the same VAT on those goods, they're still going to pay the same thing. So that's all the same. However, the differences come in if you can pay yourself from your own company, you can structure it in a way that you pay less income tax through paying a bit of salary, paying dividends and so forth, and then also deferring income. Also, your pension payments or contributions can be different. So that increases your tax sort of gap, if that if you want to use it that way. Where a PAYE person just gets paid salary and bonus. And now those are the most highly taxed sources of income in the UK, definitely, in the UK. We've seen it, right? If an owner of a large public traded company does something wrong, irrelevant of what that company does or how valuable that company is, the stock generally falls into a pool of nothing, right? Because in a public company where the stock is traded openly on the stock exchange, the value of that stock is driven by supply and demand, it's driven by emotion, it's driven by news, it's driven by quite a lot of variables over and above the actual accounting or total net worth of that company. I mean, we've seen it, right? If an owner of a large public traded company does something wrong, irrelevant of what that company does or how valuable that company is, the stock generally falls into a pool of nothing, right? And the company may still have value, it may still be doing quite a good things.
Welcome back to the show. It is your girl Sarah right here on Relax Radio. Now you're tuned into the sunrise, and it's almost the final few minutes of my show. But don't worry, because we still have a little bit of time left to discuss chronic pain, to discuss why health systems are in fact ill-equipped to deal with chronic pain, and why we need to sort of take the new measures, try to find new ways to deal with chronic pain as well. So that's what we will be talking about. But before we head into that conversation, just a quick reminder to make sure you follow us on our social media, which is basically Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And also, just a very, very quick reminder to download our app, which is available on both the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store. That way you can be a part of this conversation anytime you want. Now also, I know it's a final few minutes, but if you still have any questions, any thoughts, messages that you would like to share with us, well, make sure you text me on 07852473473, because I would absolutely love it if you could be a part of this conversation as well. But let's actually get into this conversation. We'll talk about why health systems are in fact ill-equipped to deal with chronic pain. So, like I said earlier, a lot of the doctors until recently assumed that chronic pain was something that was imaginary, right? Something that was actually in our heads, that we would often think we're in a lot of pain, but we weren't actually in a lot of pain. But obviously, new research said otherwise, and new research actually showed that chronic pain is something that people go through. Chronic pain is something that some people actually have, and it is in fact a serious condition. But the thing is, because we don't really have enough information on it, because we don't really know how to diagnose chronic pain, we don't really know what to do with people who are diagnosed with chronic pain either, it's quite obvious that our health system right now is quite ill-equipped to deal with chronic pain, especially with patients with many chronic overlapping pain conditions, right? Now, many patients with chronic pain actually take multiple drugs to get through the day, and working out which ones work actually take years. So imagine, being in so much of pain, being in so much of discomfort for years to figure out the medication that you really need to use. So that is in fact one of the reasons why it's why our health system right now is quite ill-equipped to deal with chronic pain. Now, a lot of people with chronic pain actually describe it as trying to navigate a maze, because it's basically this hit and miss trial and error experiment of trying to firstly find someone who's knowledgeable about even one of these conditions, and much less their overlap or interconnectedness, right? Obviously, it's hard enough to find someone who has enough knowledge about one of these chronic conditions, but to find someone who has knowledge about multiple many of these many of these overlapping chronic pain conditions, it's quite like looking for a needle in a haystack. Essentially, that's what they have described it as. Now, even though we really have no idea, or even though the health sector is still currently trying to figure out what treatments or therapies work for which patients, pain experts have actually accepted the existence of a central sensitization of of pain, right? And family doctors are, even though pain experts have actually accepted it, less or rather family doctors are in fact less aware of it, meaning that they may dismiss a patient's pain in the absence of any obvious abnormality or injury, right? Now this is what I said, when doctors say that the pain that we have is imaginary, or that sometimes the pain doesn't exist, it's simply because they can't pin the pain on anything, any of your underlying conditions, right? Because a lot of them are unaware of the fact that something called chronic pain even exists, right? So in terms of educating, in terms of making family doctors aware of the fact that something like this exists, it's very, very important that our government actually spends resources, spends money to make people, or to make health services aware of the fact, and even pain experts make other doctors aware of the fact that chronic pain actually exists and it affects a lot of people. Right now, it's actually quite terrifying to think that anyone who has been to their general physician to complain about pain has actually been sent on their way back home, simply because of all these professionals being unaware of the fact that chronic pain actually exists. Now, one problem that stems from this poor medical appreciation of chronic pain is the overprescription of opioid drugs. Now, more often than not, opioid drugs are actually used to treat chronic pain conditions. And look, the thing is, opioids are actually effective at dampening short-term severe pain, or even cancer pain, and they're highly addictive, right? The thing is, even though it's effective at a certain time period, it's also very addictive, and an accidental overdose kills about 50,000 people in the United States alone each year. And that's just the United States. So imagine if we were talking about everyone in the world, everyone here in UK, those numbers would in fact be much, much higher, right? And the thing is, even though it's good at dampening the pain in a short term, it doesn't always mean that it gets any better. Sometimes opioids can actually make chronic pain worse. And there's also the matter of that sometimes, or there's also the matter that chronic pain is often an unrecognized but serious health condition, and patients with chronic pain are told that it exists in their mind. So those are a few myths and sort of ideas, claims that need to be dealt with, that need to be tackled, especially if we're talking about trying to battle chronic pain, trying to make sure that people with chronic pain actually get proper treatment, and people with chronic pain are given proper medication to make sure that it doesn't end up with them, having intensive pain, with them going through unnecessary procedures and surgeries and whatnot to figure out where this pain exists. So that is the conversation for today about chronic pain. I really, really hope you enjoyed your 3 hours with me. But don't worry, because Jamie will be here on the chat trap to actually keep you company with everything related to yourself, self motivation, even entertainment. So make sure you stay tuned. But it's time for me to head out of here. But don't worry, because I'll be back again tomorrow as well, which is obviously the last day of June. I have to say, time flies by really fast, but don't worry, because I'll be back. And until then, I really hope you have a very, very good day.